After my fiancé abandoned his child with me to run off with another woman, I made sure he'd never get her back when he finally redditted everyone. I'm Amanda, and today I want to share with you one of the most heartbreaking yet ultimately empowering stories about love, betrayal, and protecting an innocent child from the person who should have loved her most. This is about how my ex-fiancé abandoned his 4-year-old daughter with me to run off with another woman, and what I did to make sure he could never hurt that precious little girl again. By the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the most loving thing you can do is make the hardest decision of your life. Let me start by telling you about how I met David and his daughter Emma. I was 28, working as an elementary school teacher, and had been single for about a year after ending a long-term relationship that just wasn't going anywhere. I met David at a coffee shop near my school where I often went to grade papers. He was there with this adorable little girl with curly brown hair and the biggest brown eyes I'd ever seen. She was coloring quietly while he worked on his laptop, and something about the scene just melted my heart. David was 32. A software engineer who had been raising Emma alone since her mother died in a car accident when Emma was just 18 months old. He was attractive, seemed responsible, and clearly adored his daughter. When Emma accidentally knocked over her juice box and started crying, I helped clean it up, and that's how we started talking. David seemed grateful for the kindness, and Emma took to me immediately, which he said was unusual for her since she was normally shy around strangers. We started dating slowly, which I appreciated because I understood that Emma had to be his priority. David was very careful about introducing new people into her life, and it took almost 3 months before I was invited to their apartment for dinner. When I finally met Emma properly, she was reserved at first, but by the end of the evening, she was showing me her toys and asking if I would read her a bedtime story. Over the next year, our relationship developed naturally. I grew to love Emma as if she were my own daughter, and she seemed to view me as a mother figure, which both thrilled and terrified me. David and I talked extensively about the responsibilities of dating someone with a child, and I made it clear that if we were going to be together, I was all in. Emma wasn't just part of the package, she was the most important part. David seemed to appreciate my commitment to Emma, and our little family unit felt natural and loving. I would pick Emma up from daycare when David had to work late, help with bedtime routines, attend parent-teacher conferences, and gradually took on more and more parental responsibilities. Emma started calling me Mama Amanda, which made David emotional because she had never called anyone Mama before. After 18 months of dating, David proposed to me on Emma's 6th birthday. It was perfect. He had planned a small party with just a few of Emma's friends, and after we sang happy birthday and she blew out her candles, David got down on one knee with the ring. He said he wanted to make our family official and asked if I would marry both of them. Emma clapped and asked if this meant I would be her real mommy now. I said yes to both of them, and it felt like the beginning of our happily ever after. The engagement period was wonderful. We started planning a small wedding for the following spring, and Emma was excited about being our flower girl. We looked at houses together, talked about giving Emma a little brother or sister, and I started the process of legally adopting Emma after we got married. David said he wanted Emma to have the security of knowing I would always be her mother. No matter what happened to him, everything seemed perfect until about 3 weeks before our wedding. David started acting strange, distant, distracted, and spending more time on his phone than usual. When I asked him about it, he said work was stressing him out and that planning the wedding was more overwhelming than he had expected. I believed him because I knew he had some big projects at work, and wedding planning can be stressful even when you want to get married. Then, 1 week before our wedding, David came home and sat me down for what he called an important conversation. He looked nervous and guilty, which immediately put me on alert. He started by saying how much he loved me and appreciated everything I had done for Emma, but that he had been doing some serious thinking about our future. What came next was like a punch to the gut. David told me he had been having an affair with a coworker named Lisa for the past 2 months. He said it started as just emotional support during a difficult project, but had developed into something more. He claimed he never meant for it to happen, but that he couldn't ignore his feelings for her. He said he was confused about what he wanted and needed time to figure things out. I was devastated but tried to stay calm because Emma was sleeping in the next room. I asked David what this meant for our wedding, for Emma, for everything we had built together. He said he thought we should postpone the wedding and that he needed some space to work through his feelings. He wanted to take a temporary separation to see if what he had with Lisa was real or just a midlife crisis. When I asked about Emma, David said she could stay with me during his break because he didn't want to disrupt her routine or confuse her with his personal drama. He said it would just be for a few weeks while he figured things out, and that I was the most stable presence in her life right now. He made it sound like he was being considerate of Emma's needs, but I could see the relief in his eyes at not having to deal with the complications of single parenting. While he explored his affair, I agreed to watch Emma because I couldn't bear the thought of her being caught in the middle of David's crisis, and because I genuinely loved her and wanted to protect her from the chaos her father was creating. David packed a bag that night and left the next morning, telling Emma that he had to go away for work for a while but that she would stay with me. Emma seemed confused but not overly distressed, since she was used to me taking care of her. What I expected to be a few weeks of watching Emma while David worked through his issues turned into something much more permanent. After David left, I heard from him sporadically, a few phone calls to check on Emma, some text messages asking how she was doing, but no real indication of when he planned to come back or what he had decided about our relationship. 2 weeks after David left, I found out through social media that he had eloped with Lisa to Las Vegas. A mutual friend posted pictures of their wedding, and David had changed his relationship status to married. He hadn't told me, hadn't told Emma, and hadn't made any arrangements for his daughter's care beyond assuming I would continue taking care of her indefinitely. I was heartbroken, angry, and completely overwhelmed. Here I was, suddenly a single mother to a 6-year-old who wasn't legally my child, with no idea when or if her father was coming back. Emma kept asking when Daddy was coming home, and I didn't know what to tell her. David had effectively abandoned both of us, but Emma was the innocent victim in all of this. For the first few months, I held out hope that David would come to his senses and come back for Emma, if not for me. I continued caring for her, maintaining her routines, and trying to provide stability while her world had been turned upside down. I used my own savings to pay for her expenses, enrolled her in counseling to help her process her father's absence, and did everything I could to minimize the trauma of his abandonment. But as months passed with minimal contact from David, I realized I needed to think long-term about Emma's welfare. I consulted with a family lawyer about my legal standing and was told that without formal custody arrangements, I had no legal rights to Emma despite being her primary caregiver. If David decided to come back and take her, I would have no recourse. Regardless of what was in Emma's best interests, the lawyer advised me to contact Child Services to report the situation and potentially begin the process of gaining legal custody of Emma. This was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make because I knew it would mean officially acknowledging that David had abandoned his daughter and potentially starting a process that could end with Emma being placed in foster care if I couldn't get custody. After 6 months of David being essentially absent from Emma's life, with only occasional phone calls and no financial support, I made the decision to contact Child Protective Services. I explained the situation, that Emma's father had left her with me and disappeared, that I had no legal standing but was her primary caregiver, and that I wanted to explore options for giving Emma legal stability. The social worker assigned to Emma's case was understanding but thorough. She investigated David's abandonment, documented the lack of support or contact, and began the process of determining what was in Emma's best interests. I expressed my desire to become Emma's legal guardian or adoptive parent, and the social worker began evaluating my suitability and stability. During this process, I had to make one of the most difficult decisions of my life. The social worker explained that if I couldn't gain immediate custody, Emma would need to be placed in temporary foster care while the legal situation was resolved. The alternative was to continue in legal limbo with no protection if David suddenly decided he wanted Emma back. I chose to have Emma placed in foster care temporarily while I pursued adoption. It was heartbreaking to explain to Emma that she would be staying with another family for a while, but I knew it was the only way to eventually give her the legal security she deserved. I made sure she was placed with a loving foster family who understood the situation and allowed me to maintain regular contact. The foster care placement lasted 4 months while I jumped through every legal hoop to gain custody of Emma. I had background checks, home inspections, psychological evaluations, and countless meetings with social workers and attorneys. During this time, Emma's foster family was wonderful, but it was still traumatic for both of us to be separated after 2 years of being a family. David, meanwhile, had been served with papers regarding the custody proceedings but had largely ignored them. He was living his new life with Lisa, apparently with no interest in fighting for his daughter or even maintaining regular contact with her. His abandonment was well documented by this point, making the legal case for terminating his parental rights relatively straightforward. After 4 months of foster care and legal proceedings, I was finally granted legal custody of Emma with the path to adoption cleared. David's parental rights were terminated due to abandonment and failure to support his child. Emma came home to me, and we began the process of healing from the trauma of separation and uncertainty. For nearly 2 years, Emma and I lived as mother and daughter. I legally adopted her, she took my last name, and we built a stable, loving life together. Emma thrived in school, made friends, and seemed to recover well from her father's abandonment with the help of continued counseling. She rarely asked about David anymore, and when she did, I answered her questions honestly but age-appropriately. Then, 2.5 years after David had abandoned Emma, he suddenly reappeared. I got a phone call out of the blue from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was David, and he sounded different, older, tired, maybe even desperate. He said he had been thinking about Emma and wanted to see her. He asked if he could come visit and maybe work out some kind of arrangement for spending time with his daughter. I was shocked and angry, but I tried to stay calm. I asked David where he had been for the past 2.5 years, why he had abandoned his daughter, and what had suddenly changed to make him interested in being a father again. He gave me vague answers about needing to find himself, working through some personal issues, and realizing that he had made mistakes. When I pressed for details, David admitted that his marriage to Lisa had ended badly. She had left him for someone else, taking a significant portion of his assets, and he was now living alone and reassessing his life choices. He said he realized that Emma was the most important thing in his life and that he wanted to make things right. I could hear in his voice that this wasn't really about Emma, it was about David feeling lonely and wanting to reclaim something he had thrown away when his shiny new life didn't work out. He wasn't calling because he had been missing his daughter for 2 years. He was calling because he needed something to fill the void in his failed life. That's when I told David the truth about what had happened after he abandoned Emma. I explained that after he left with no plan for her care and no ongoing support, I had been forced to make impossible decisions to protect her welfare. I told him about contacting child services, about the legal proceedings, about Emma being placed in foster care while I fought for custody. David was shocked and started getting angry, asking how I could have put his daughter in foster care. I calmly explained that Emma was no longer his daughter legally, that his parental rights had been terminated due to abandonment, and that I had adopted her. I told him that Emma was now my daughter in every legal sense, and that he had no claim to her whatsoever. David started making demands and threats, saying he would fight the adoption, get lawyers involved, and prove that I had manipulated the system. I told him he was welcome to try, but that the legal record was clear he had abandoned his daughter for over 2 years, provided no support, maintained minimal contact, and had made no effort to contest the custody proceedings when he was properly served with papers. I also told David something that was harder to say but necessary, that Emma had moved on. She had processed his abandonment with professional help, had built a stable life, and rarely asked about him anymore. Bringing him back into her life now would only serve his needs, not hers, and would potentially re-traumatize a child who had finally found security. David became more desperate, offering to pay child support retroactively, promising to be a better father, and begging for just a chance to see Emma and explain himself. I told him that his chance to be Emma's father was when he was her father, and he had chosen to walk away from that responsibility. The little girl he abandoned was now a happy, stable child who didn't need the chaos of his guilty conscience disrupting her life. The conversation ended with David saying he would contact a lawyer and explore his options, but I knew he had no legal standing. More importantly, I knew that Emma's best interests were served by maintaining the stability and security she had finally found, not by allowing a man who had already abandoned her once to potentially do it again when things got difficult. Over the following weeks, David made several more attempts to contact me, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening, but always focused on what he wanted rather than what was best for Emma. I documented these contacts and consulted with my attorney, who confirmed that David had no legal recourse and that his attempts to contact us could constitute harassment if they continued. Eventually, David's call stopped, and I assumed he had either gotten legal advice about his lack of options or had simply moved on to some other way of dealing with his life disappointments. Emma never knew about his attempts to contact us because I saw no reason to disrupt her peace with information about someone who had proven unreliable and selfish. Now, 3 years later, Emma is 9 years old and thriving. She's in 4th grade, plays soccer, takes piano lessons, and has a close group of friends. She sometimes mentions that she used to have a daddy but that he went away, and that I adopted her to make our family official. She doesn't seem traumatized by David's absence anymore. If anything, she seems proud that I chose her and fought to keep her. I've been in therapy myself to process the trauma of David's betrayal and the difficult decisions I had to make to protect Emma. My therapist has helped me understand that putting Emma in foster care temporarily was actually an act of love. It was the only way to give her legal security and ultimately provide her with a stable, permanent home. The hardest part of this whole experience was the temporary separation from Emma during the foster care period, knowing that I was the only stable parent figure she had ever known, and then having to explain that she needed to stay with another family while the adults sorted out legal issues was heartbreaking. But I knew it was temporary and necessary to give her permanent security. Looking back, I have no regrets about my decisions. David abandoned his daughter when she needed him most, choosing his own selfish desires over her welfare. When he decided he wanted her back, it wasn't because he had genuinely missed being her father or because he had addressed whatever issues led to his abandonment. It was because his backup plan had failed, and he was looking for something to make him feel better about his life choices. Emma deserved better than being treated as a consolation prize or a backup plan. She deserved a parent who would prioritize her needs, provide stability, and never abandon her for personal gratification. By ensuring that David could never legally reclaim her, I protected her from potential future abandonment and gave her the security of knowing that I would always be her mother. The legal process was expensive, emotionally draining, and sometimes felt overwhelming, but it was worth every difficult moment to give Emma the childhood she deserved. She has never had to wonder if her parent might leave her again, never had to compete with her father's romantic interests for attention, and never had to question whether she was truly wanted and loved. I've learned that sometimes protecting someone you love means making decisions that others might not understand or approve of. Some people have criticized me for keeping a father from his daughter, but those people don't understand what Emma went through when David abandoned her, or how much work it took to help her recover from that trauma. David had the opportunity to be Emma's father, and he chose to walk away. He had months to reconsider his decision and come back before legal proceedings began. He ignored court documents and made no effort to maintain his parental relationship. When he finally decided he wanted to be a father again, it was too late, not because I was vindictive, but because Emma's need for security and stability had to take priority over his regrets. Today, Emma and I have a wonderful mother-daughter relationship built on trust, consistency, and unconditional love. She knows she's safe with me, that I'll always be there for her, and that she never has to worry about being abandoned again. That security has allowed her to flourish in ways that might not have been possible if she had continued to live with uncertainty about her father's commitment to her. I hope that sharing this story helps other people understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is make the hard choice to protect someone from further harm, even if it means being seen as the bad guy. Emma deserved a parent who would never abandon her, and I'm proud to be that parent for her. David made his choice when he walked away, and I made mine when I fought to give Emma the security she needed. I'll never regret putting her welfare first, even when it meant making the most difficult decision of my life.